Hey everyone, it's Gregory. Thank you for your patience on us getting this one out. Editing took a while longer than we expected, and next episode is also probably not going to be on schedule, so don't worry if it doesn't come out on the first Tuesday of the month, which is how we've tried to get them out in the past. It's been a wild summer. It's been a wild year. You all know how it is. Also, speaking of the inescapable grasp of capitalism, our next episode, so the thing that we are watching for next time, is currently not available anywhere on a streaming service. So, unfortunately, you'll have to, at least at time of this recording, either buy it or find someone who has it or, acquire it via some other means. So, thank you, and now, on with the show.
Let's pretend it's the end of this whole ugly story. We vanquished the foe and we triumphed in glory. There's nothing but rainbows and blue skies ahead. Hallelujah, amen, it's the end. We threw off the yoke and we broke all the shackles. We tore down the walls and we burned down the castle. The oppressors all scattered and naked they fled. Hallelujah, amen, it's the end.
Welcome to Before the Future Came, a Star Trek podcast. We're looking at the utopian ideals of Star Trek as we voyage from one work to the next, following a breadcrumb trail of motifs. Last episode, we discussed Cupid, which had characters examine past relationships. This month, we're talking about a pair of episodes from the animated series, which bring paternal relationships out of the past. Yesteryear, Season 1, Episode 2, written by D.C. Fontana and directed by Hal Sutherland, and How Sharper Than a Serpent's Tooth, Season 2, Episode 5, written by Russell Bates and David Wise, and directed by Bill Reed. I'm Gregory, just an old, lonely being who wants to help others.
I'm Melissa, a Terran who could never be a true Vulcan.
And I'm Lucy, and I hear all.
Well, Melissa, you picked this month's episode, so if you could, give us a summary in your own words.
Oh, all right.
We doing the 2 episodes back to back?
Back to back, yep.
Okay.
Yesteryear. Stardate 5373.4. The Enterprise is visiting the planet containing the Guardian of Forever to assist historians in investigating Federation history. Kirk, Spock, and a red shirt return from observing Orion history, but nobody from the Enterprise recognizes Spock. The first officer of the ship is an Andorian named Thelen. After some investigation, they conclude that something in the past changed the future, and that in the current timeline, Spock died at the age of 7 during his Cas1 maturity test. During the test, Spock remembers that his life had been saved by an adult cousin who was never seen again, and with Spock having been off observing history using the Guardian of Forever, he hadn't gone back to save his own life as a child. Spock gears up and goes back to save himself under the name Selleck, arriving early enough to see some Vulcan kids bully child Spock, and then to see Sarek bully child Spock for having emotions.
Oof.
Baby Spock is told.
One of the lesser Sareks here.
Oh yeah, not the best Sarek. Spock is told, for probably the 100th time, that choosing to take the Cas1 is an irrevocable choice between Vulcan and Earth. To Selleck's confusion, Spock sneaks out to begin his Cas1 early, and the family pet, a massive elderly canine named Ichaya, follows him out and refuses to go home.
It's like a big old, walrus bear thing.
Yeah, like a bearish type of thing, I guess, more so than canine.
But apparently Vulcans name their pets like Apple products.
Yes.
The Ichaya.
Yes. And Selleck follows the mournful noises of the bear and follows them. Spock and Ichaya are attacked by one of Vulcan's many dangerous critters, a Limatya, which is like a big cat. Selleck neck pinches the Limatya, but after a little heart-to-heart between Selleck and Spock about how Vulcans do have emotions, actually, It turns out that Ichaya was nicked by it and is dying. Nicked by the cat. Spock runs back to town to get a very skeptical healer, but unfortunately Ichaya is too far gone, and Spock opts to put him to sleep so that he dies with peace and dignity instead of continuing to live in pain. Once back in town, Spock tells Sarek that he has business with his schoolmates and goes to show his new neck-pinching skills. Selleck encourages Spock to try to understand his son, then returns to the present day and exchanges quips with McCoy like normal.
And if you didn't watch the episode, Ichaya was not supposed to die the first time around. So that is a change in history.
Yes. Alright. How sharper than a serpent's tooth? Oof. Stardate 6063.4. The Enterprise is investigating a probe that is scanning Federation systems and signaling out to something deeper in space. Their signals detect an incoming vessel that turns out to be an unidentified, unorthodox ship, twice as large as the Enterprise. As it approaches, it traps the Enterprise in a spherical force field. The vessel is made of ceramic and looks like, well, Kukulkan, a serpent deity worshipped by the Mayans and Aztecs. Certain crew members, including Walking Bear, who is a descendant of the Comanche, are kidnapped into Kukulkan City. It's a multicultural riddle city, which is what human cultures were challenged to create during Kukulkan's time on Earth. The kidnapped away team goes around the town, rotating statues to solve puzzles like good little gamers. When it's solved, Kukulkan appears and asks why the away team isn't showing their hatred for him, and is then bummed when he realizes that humans really have forgotten him. Kukulkan takes it upon himself to remind humanity who he is, including showing that he keeps creatures safe and content in cages, in mentally constructed paradises. Kukulkan and the away team go back and forth about what it means to live in peace and how to go about doing so, touching on humanity being children, actually, and being disobedient, and how children, including some of these creatures, can be easily controlled and contained if you get them young enough. And then all hell breaks loose. On the ship, Spock and the crew figure out how to get out of the force field. To provide a distraction so that Kukulkan doesn't pay attention to them, Kirk and McCoy let the captive creatures free, including a very dangerous cat critter that I think is going to be discussed in detail later. When things settle down and the creatures have been pacified, the crew and Kukulkan again discuss how humanity is violent, but humanity is no longer Kukulkan's children to be needing to be led by a god. The ep closes with, well, among many other things, the ep closes with Spock saying that while Vulcan doesn't have legends like Kukulkan, they have the facts of visits by ancient beings, and that those beings left wiser than when they arrived. Et voila.
Good old Vulcan. These are very like tidy short episodes as expected, since they're only like 20 minutes. But like it's interesting to see that like these feel canon. Like these don't feel like they're some of the weirder animated series episodes that's like they were just goofing around. Like the Kukulkan episode could be like there's shades of Star Trek 4 here, the one where they time travel back and the aliens are after whales.
Oh, yeah.
Like the idea of a godlike probe that approaches Earth because of some ancient pact.
And when animated series was made no longer canon, I don't know what happened. I don't know what you do without Yesteryear in Spock's history, because that is like kind of a fundamentally built in. Everyone knows about the Kaswan, everyone knows about Ichaya. Like these are like, I don't know where you learned that other than this episode. Maybe it comes up elsewhere. But yeah, animated series.
When
so
they
weird.
removed it from the canon? Because it's back in.
It's back in. I don't know. It was relatively recently, like the last 20 years? 15 years? Maybe when the new shows started coming out.
Interesting.
I thought that Spock mentioned something about Ichaya in another episode. I feel like I maybe read it on Memory Alpha somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think they've peppered some stuff throughout Discovery and Strange New Worlds.
Aha. Okay. The animated series was officially removed from canon at Roddenberry's request in 1988, with the exception of some parts involving Spock's youth from Yesteryear.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
He
So
was
all
motivated.
that's Next Generation through Discovery, basically.
Yep.
It was not considered canon.
That's kind of interesting, right?
Yeah.
Well, we've each brought a topic for discussion, and mine is, I guess what I'm sort of tentatively calling radical autonomy, although if you're in a corporate setting, I don't think we mean the same thing, just FYI. I do think...
Is that a buzzword?
It seems to be something buzzy, but I really don't understand how it is anything to do with autonomy. From what I could briefly read, I am not in a corporate setting, so I literally know nothing about it. But I think what I mean by it will become clear as we talk about it. I thought a very interesting convergence between these two episodes was the idea of how parents construe children, and and really the lack of autonomy that parents seem to consider their children to have. I think it's really interesting, both on these shows and in the real world, often that parents make decisions, you know, like marrying a human, or having kids at all, or deciding where to live on Earth or Vulcan or whatever. So as parents, you know, you make all these decisions, and then you have kids, and then you think, oh, well, they need to make the kind of decisions that I would make, or do the kind of things that I would do. And that's kind of wild when you think about it, because, I mean, I think that kind of thinking requires you to think that children aren't people with autonomy, right? Like, and I personally believe that children are people.
Can we get an autonomy definition?
Autonomy, I think, would be meaning having agency, having the freedom to make decisions about oneself and what one does. And obviously there are levels in which children don't have autonomy, right? I mean, babies don't have a ton of autonomy because they can't do anything. They can't fend for themselves. And, you know, I think we do have a lot of responsibility for young children to keep them out of traffic, for example. Although, I mean, I could also argue that maybe we should think more about how we are building roads and stuff so that children just really shouldn't be running into traffic. You know what I mean? Like, I think we could imagine a different...
I'm going to get into that in my section.
Oh, good.
For sure.
Well, I mean, I think we could imagine a different world, too. But even in the world that we have, I think it's interesting how often parents, and then the wider culture, don't consider children to be people with a whole lot of autonomy and the ability to make decisions for themselves. I mean, or if they do have autonomy, it's really constricted by these expectations. And I think that creates a problem for children. And we saw it in the episode Yesteryear with Sarek saying to Spock, yeah, I know you're gonna pass this as long as you have the right mind and heart, right? Like, I was like, okay, well, that's... and Spock was like me. He was like, well, what if I don't? So, Kukulkan.
Almost.
It's Kukulkan.
Kukulkan.
We had to look this up. I mean, you know, it's an ancient Mayan name that also exists in other cultures, so its pronunciation varied. But best I could see is Kukulkan.
Kukulkan his is very overt, right? He has all these peaceful specimens who live in complete containment, right? He has basically a zoo, and what we see are very small glass structures that these creatures, he calls them specimens, are living in. And he says this is because they're safe here and they, you know, can't get into trouble, and like this, you know, I've done this for them. And I thought that was such an interesting correlation between the episode about Sarek and Spock, because there's ways in which Sarek has also created that kind of glass container for Spock, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kukulkan has a couple of interesting lines, like, "My children, I hope to help you, teach you," which I would want to have a discussion about what he means by teaching there. I am not sure. I don't know that teaching and learning are possible without some kind of belief in autonomy.
And I feel like Kukulkan specifically talking about teaching is weird because he's keeping these entities in paradise virtual realities. So like no teaching that can be granted to them can translate into any useful capabilities, right? They don't have sufficient autonomy to even make use of teaching.
Yeah, it's really interesting for me as a teacher because, you know, we often talk about classrooms and teachers will say things like, I'm preparing for them for the real world. And it's kind of like, what are you talking about? This is real. But in Kukulkan's, thank you. Kukulkan's case, like, he's not preparing them for anything or offering a real experience for them. However, I will say I also disagree with Kirk because Kirk says if children are made totally dependent on their teachers, they will remain always children. And I strongly disagree with that too. I mean, that is factually incorrect. Like, children... Yeah,
they will grow up. Their teachers will leave. They will become adults.
Children will...
Of some sort.
Children will grow up. And they will not be children anymore, and how they think about the world is going to be impacted by whatever you did as a teacher or a parent. So I think that's kind of a wild take on Kirk's part, to be 100% honest. Like, what are you talking about? Like, please, I need a citation. Actually, there's several citations I'm asking for in this episode. Like, I'm afraid I'm going to need to say more. And then... one of the hazards of thinking this way about children is it sort of encourages us to think this way about the world, right? That we can just, like, inflict what we think on other people, or that other people can just do the things that we want them to do. Like, there's a quote, and Gregory, you're going to have to remind me of the book, but Greg had shared a quote from a book like probably a month or so ago, and I think about it maybe every day since then. The quote is, "One of the hazards of refusing to accept change in yourself is getting locked into the habit of trying to change others so that you can have the illusion of remaining the same." And I think there's a real, like, that really resonated with me in watching these episodes. I guess I would also just add a couple more points. I don't think anybody else said they were going to talk about Shakespeare, so I will just note that how sharper than a serpent's tooth to have a thankless child, which comes up in the second episode, is from Lear, Shakespeare's Lear, and Lear, of course, is a king who loses everything and has 3 daughters that he hopes will take care of him, and only one of them is good according to him, so he's kind of cursing the other ones like they're thankless, which is interesting, right? Because I think it assumes a certain view of children. I think in this case both Sarek and Kukulkan and Sarek are both like Lear in that sense, right? Like, and they have this expectation of their children, or what they construe as their children, that they should be thankful for the things that they're offering, even though those things were not necessarily things that were desired or needed by the children. Like, they were the ones who decided that, and then got to decide whether that was the children were behaving acceptably. And I have a lot of trouble with it as an anti-capitalist anyway, because I do feel like owing, like when we talk about owing people things, like owing our parents gratitude, or owing anybody anything, I mean, and I do in many ways feel like we're interconnected as people, but I prefer to, I feel like it's more generative for me to think of that as an interconnectivity, and like, and that our connections are valuable, rather than thinking of it as a system of debts and, I don't know, what's the opposite of debt? Whatever that is.
Balance.
Yeah.
I think to think about
that's an equity.
Yeah, relationships in that sort of transactional way is also one of the things that capitalism creates in us. And I know that's something that we talk about with Star Trek a lot, is this, like, in what ways does the worldview that's espoused in Star Trek, like, is it really imagining this sort of utopian future? And I would say a lot of these relationships that they're depicting, like, this is very transactional. It's very steeped in sort of what I would say is a late capitalist view of relationships. And I think it's ultimately sort of diminishes the possibility of, you know, a relationship with a child or with someone else, you know, to think like that. I will just...
We see that with Sarek.
Yeah.
Like...
yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Sarek doesn't get to have the relationship with Spock that he maybe wants because of how he treats him.
And Spock doesn't get to have the relationship that he wants either. Like, nobody's satisfied. And I can just say, as a mom, that one of my offspring texted me this week and thought I was going to be a guest speaker on the prison industrial complex, and I wasn't the guest speaker, but he loved it. And then he said, but I already knew everything they had to say because of you. And like, he was grateful. You know, he said, thank you. I'm glad that I know this, but I certainly didn't demand it of him. And it actually, I think he's giving me back way more, you know, than I gave him in offering that, you know. And yeah, so I feel a kind of sadness, honestly, in looking at how some of these characters interact with each other, and how they construe both children and how that means that they construe other people and other relationships. And I do think it is very much of its time in the United States of America and not a sort of utopian space future.
Sometimes I kind of think of Star Trek, the media franchise, as like, you can imagine that there is this Star Trek world that exists out in the multiverse, and like we're looking at it through the telescope of the, you know, media creations, the TV shows and movies, and like there's some cases where I'm like, I can criticize the world of Star Trek as the whole gestalt seems to portray it, or I can say, I don't think that this is a very, like, clear view of Star Trek as a whole. I feel like the writers and directors of this episode have a fuzzier view than usual of this broader thing. And, like, that's silly, right? There is no world except that which is portrayed in the media, but it's interesting of me to be like, is this a problem with this episode or with Star Trek as a whole? I feel like sometimes Star Trek gets better at how they treat children, and in like, I think Deep Space Nine has a little better job of at least like letting children do things on their own, Jake and Nog especially.
I mean, I think Alexander's story, Worf's son Alexander, to me his story is one of the most resonant stories in Star Trek.
Yeah.
I will also say, I think it is wild to have 7-year-olds make irrevocable decisions. Like, I don't know what world you're living in. If you asked a 7-year-old, go ahead and decide what your rest of your life is going to look like, bud. Okay.
Yeah.
7-year-olds have trouble deciding what they're going to wear today. To be fair, so do I. But, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That kind of blew my mind a little bit when Spock is like, you get to decide the rest of your life right now. And I was like, didn't he just say that kid was 7?
Yep.
And Vulcan 7, which is younger, right?
I think so. In the Sharper Tooth episode, one of the things that, when I was thinking about children and how children are treated, something I hear from my colleagues at work, when I ask them when we talk about autonomy of children, which I don't know why we talk about this because I work there. They say that their children don't have enough knowledge of the world or themselves to be granted any autonomy. And I say any by the standards of the people on this call, but they mean, you know, this comes up with like whether a child can identify as trans. A 6-year-old doesn't know enough to be able to know if they might not be the gender I tell them they are, right? So more than even just like children are people, it's this like mysterious, undefinable threshold of knowledge. And I thought about that with Coco Con of like, we used to be children and now we are not. And I'm like, the fuck? One, racist. Two, like, what? Because you know who they're talking about, right? They're talking about the Aztecs and the Mayans, in part, because that's where Kukulkan was, right?
I'll talk about that later.
Okay.
Too.
As when I got to that part, I was like, Jesus, how did I pick the most offensive fucking episode for us to watch?
This is not
no.
by any means.
But yes, that component of childhood autonomy is also, I think, folds into there a little bit.
I think a lot of people think that, I mean, I don't know, maybe there's a book somewhere about parenting where it tells people, just tell your kids what to do because they can't reason. Or, you know, I feel like a lot of people come from that kind of school of parenting. It's not matched my experience, you know, like, I am a parent. I've done this twice. I'm different now than I was the first time I started doing this, but, you know, I don't find that it's that often that I have to, like, just tell someone what to do.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do. I'm not gonna say it's never, but it is a lot rarer, I feel like, than a lot of people think it is.
Yeah. All right. I want to talk a little bit about monocultures in Star Trek and in these 2 episodes, which I think demonstrate some of the problems of monocultures in Star Trek pretty damn well. So we've talked about it a little bit before, and I think it's just sort of well established that Star Trek has the fatal flaw in sci-fi and fantasy of each planet kind of having one culture, or maybe 2 if you're going to have people with black paint on one side and white paint on the other side, you know, that sort of thing. And you get this very, like, Vulcan is the place where people act like this, and there's nothing different. Everyone acts the same. Or Romulans are all like this. And there are convenient things about that. One, it makes your writing simpler. It makes your story Bible simpler. It is easier to have a utopia in a monoculture. That's one of the things, like, in the real world, when we talk about, oh, the rest of the world has socialized medicine. They're like, oh, but Sweden is a monoculture, so we can't do what they do because we are so complex here. Leaving aside, you know, what aspects of that are true or not, that's sort of the space Star Trek plays in. In these 2 episodes, we have, like, I think the most quintessential examples of Vulcan as a monoculture, and a very rigid one, in which, as we said, Sarek tells a 7-year-old,
you must do this specific ritual or you will be banished from Vulcan culture forever and not be considered Vulcan.
Exactly. There is one way to be Vulcan. This is what Vulcan is. Now, we find out, I think these episodes, like, I think animated series is like early 70s, maybe mid 70s, then the movie comes out. We find out in a few Star Trek movies later that there are Vulcans who are not like this. Spock's brother has gone off to be a long-haired hippie and have emotions, right? So they eventually complicate this, and of course modern Star Trek is, you know, it has finished that.
Pro-logic extremists and so on.
Exactly. But this idea that Vulcan must be one thing, makes no sense. Like, even with the idea, you know, there's that idea that Vulcans have such strong emotions, blah, 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 it has to be controlled. The idea that there can be no variance, no variation, even in a person who has mixed biology, if you're going with some sort of biological fundamentalism or whatever, like essentialism, I guess, makes no sense. And then if we transfer over to Kukulkan's stuff, I think so.
It is generally he.
Okay, I started my notes with its, and I was like, this is untenable. His ideas of peace and safety, right, are completely rigid, completely fixed. We don't see any of the paradises that the critters are living in, I don't think. They don't, like, show us. Presumably there's variation there. Each one of them is going to have their own sort of habitat, but the solution to peace is to encapsulate, isolate, contain, and don't allow any cross-contact. Don't allow anything else. And then to leave a riddle for each species person, you know, for humanity, for whatever, to say, yeah, build this city that I have told you to build through some calendars and so on, and you will do it right. And you will have the peace that I tell you should have. Which, I don't feel like the episode directly addresses this cookie cutter aspect of that. Like, it touches on it a bunch of ways, right? And obviously breaking the animals out, and it's so funny to hear them be like, zoos are bad. Like,
and there's a concept that sort of is passed by pretty quickly, where like Kukulkan told different Earth civilizations the same information, and each of them got it wrong. Each of them tried to build, let's say, so all our ancient monuments, and I'll talk about this later too, all our ancient monuments are like fragments of Kukulkan's great plan.
Right. No one got it right. He was waiting for the signal to be told to come back, and by the time, like, everyone forgot about him, and he was never called back. The way the monocultural part allows Star Trek to tell these little encapsulated stories works for a 24-minute episode, but is just so fucking broken when spread across an entire franchise. Like, it is, they can only do so many Yesteryears. They can only do so many Kukulkan episodes without it just being episode of the week, right? That's where you get some of the more boring episodes of Star Trek is, yep, we met another weird deity that didn't do anything interesting and had bad opinions on humanity. Humanity's children, no they're not, you know. Yeah. And maybe also kind of getting to your point earlier, Greg, about like, what is the world of Star Trek as opposed to, and Venn diagramming with the authors. You know, are we seeing the world, or are we seeing the authors? The way the modern writers have been able to introduce complexity in a way that is interesting has made the works much richer. Like, I'm very fond of animated series, and I hope that you both can see why after watching these 2 episodes. Get your little weird shouty children that don't know how to voice act. And terrible little outfits and so on, and critters that you could never do in the live shows. But the writing is just as pained and just as stuck because of this type of, these limitations they have put on themselves to try to keep things simple enough.
Yeah. Something Star Trek never does with aliens is, we could just have lines where it's like, yeah, Spock is from Capital City on Vulcan, and this is how the people of Capital City tend to do things. And, you know, obviously not everyone in Capital City does that, but like, this is the Ohio of Vulcan. And that'd be, basically everything else could be the same, just with a passing acknowledgement that like, yeah, there's another side to this planet where folks do things differently.
Yep. I feel like we might get that with Tuvok a little bit.
Interesting.
And you definitely get it in books, because I know what city Spock is from.
Oh, interesting.
And I know a couple of things about other Vulcan cities, and I must have gotten them from books. But I can't remember to what degree Tuvok gets kind of grilled on, for one, why are there dark-skinned people? You know, like, the people had all sorts of questions when Voyager started, but
Your discussion is reminding me of feminist writer Chimamanda Adichie.
Oh.
She has a really well-known TED Talk called The Danger of the Single Story, which if you haven't listened to, I do recommend that you just give it a little listen. Because she talks about being raised in Nigeria and reading all these stories about white children and never seeing herself reflected in those stories. And then, you know, finally encountering characters who were like her was, you know, sort of revolutionary for her. And she talks about the ways that when you reduce a group of people to a single story, I mean, you're reducing, you know, your own experience with humanity. And she also has a terrific novel, which I recommend too, called Americana, which is about a Nigerian who immigrates to America. It's fiction, but I mean, I think it has elements of memoir in it, because that's certainly her experience as well.
Yeah. One of the things that happens as a result of the way Vulcan is set up in Star Trek, through Spock's viewpoint and these sorts of, you know, this sort of stratification and structure we see, is that when you meet Vulcans later, there's kind of are you the kind of Vulcan that bullied Spock, or are you the kind of Vulcan who could have been his friend? Are you the kind of Vulcan who was running on the council, you know, running things? Like, there's kind of this perception of categorization of people that is also very scoped to that monoculture, where the roles seen clear, and your perspective is primarily Spock's, and especially with Bad Dad Sarek being so prominent in early Star Trek.
Speaking of bad dads.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about paternalism. So both of these episodes had, like Cupid, something that shows up a lot in Star Trek, which is like a godlike being. I think that, I don't know if you planned this, Lissa, but it worked out well, where like, we actually have, so a little behind the scenes peek, we have roles marked in our planning document for like who's doing what this episode, and they're named Guardian, Prophet, and Caretaker after 3 different godlike being types in Star Trek. And so the Guardian of Forever is like this gatekeeper of time, right? Guardian of Forever is this entity that controls this portal that lets you go back and forth through time, and is generally pretty cool about it. Like, the Guardian Forever almost always just kind of lets you through, is the vibe that I get, at least from this episode. Later, the Guardian Forever gets used in the Time War and goes off in hiding and so on, but still seems like kind of a cool, friendly person. And then we've got Kukul Khan, who is like, I don't know, I'd probably say a caretaker type. I'm a god who's going to take this culture or group of cultures and like protect them and make sure that they do things properly. And that's sort of the paternal godlike figure. We talked about, like, Lucy talked a lot about children and like the way we treat literal children, but paternalism is also this sort of broader ethical, not framework, but like ethical thing that you can do. Right? It's this pattern in politics and morality and so on. Paternalism generally is when you restrict someone's freedom or autonomy for their own good, or for what you perceive as their own good. And there's a whole lot of questions about that. Lucy talked, both I think Lucy and Lissa talked about people protecting children because children don't know any better. And that's one of the big questions of like, how paternal should you be, is like, when is knowledge important? So I think that generally everyone would agree that there are some cases in which paternalism is good. It is good if someone doesn't realize that they're about to walk into a live firing range, to put out your arm and stop them so that they cannot enter the line of fire, right? That is paternalistic. That is saying, I am going to use force, physically stop you so that you don't get hurt, because I know that you don't realize that you're going to die if you go out there. And then there are more complicated questions about the blurry areas. If you're, should there be laws to make people wear seatbelts, right? Like, people know that you can get into a car crash and die. People who don't wear seatbelts are consciously choosing to forego an action that is culturally acceptable for convenience, usually, or for rebellious feelings. And like, they probably should, because it's in the interest of everyone and the individual to wear seatbelts. But then the question is, so does that mean you throw people in prison if they don't wear seatbelts? It's a whole complicated moral situation. And this is something that isn't explored with particular amounts of nuance by, especially How Sharper Than a Serpent's Tooth is the one where we really see paternalism examined, right? It's very unexamined in Yesteryear. It's sort of like, yeah, dads get to tell sons what to do, and sons sometimes rebel against that. And then it's the job of weird time cousins to save the kid. That feels very automatic to us, although I think that we've questioned that a decent amount already. But in the case of Serpent's Tooth, it's much clearer. Kukul Khan decided that all these creatures were unsafe and saved individuals of them, right? Did not save species, saved individual creatures, and decided that humans were dangerous because they were attacking each other, and so set them an elaborate Zelda dungeon historical puzzle prank, which presumably once, if the Mayans had succeeded in building the beacon and turned it on, Kukul Khan would have come back and just put them in virtual reality forever.
Yeah.
And like, this is like extreme paternalism. This is, I am going to make sure you never get hurt, you never feel sad, at the cost of everything, all of your choices, all of your even ability to perceive the world accurately.
Did you notice or think about that this is what Picard did on Next Generation to Moriarty too?
Yep, 100%. Yeah, he puts him in a VR world where he thinks everything is good. And this is sort of the Lotus Eaters trope, although I think that Lotus Eaters, it's people who are in a bad situation choosing to not feel pain and not feel their torment, whereas this is someone in a perfectly safe but fake situation, this illusory world. This is something that happens less in sci-fi, where like there is not really a dark side to Kukulkan's actions except that he is keeping a zoo. A thing that I always think of in this sort of conversation of like, how do you stop people from doing bad things? In the Discordian religious text Principia Discordia, there is a parable called the Sermon on Ethics and Love, where someone calls up to the goddess and says, hey, can you help us stop warring? Can you help us stop hurting each other? Can you help us stop neglecting each other? And the goddess says, what's the matter with that, if that is what you want to do? And the human says, but nobody wants it. Everybody hates it. And the goddess said, oh, well, then stop.
She's got a point.
Yeah, like that's a case where paternalism reveals that it is a tactic and not a principle, right? Mm-hmm. Paternalism lets you stop people from doing a bad thing in certain circumstances, but at some point you've got to decide. People need to decide for themselves whether to do good or keep themselves safe and so on. And I think one of the things that makes this a really hard thing to wrap our minds around is our fixation on individuality. Like, we imagine that we are these individual beings, flying through the world under our own power, and that like all interactions with other people are these deliberate things that are a narrow band. They're like, the way I interact with someone is I see them with my eyes and I talk to them and then I interpret their words and their facial expressions and use that to improve my own understanding of the world. And like, that's just not, science has demonstrated that's not how we work. Right. We are social animals. We are creatures who are heavily affected by all sorts of things in our environment. We pick up things that we don't consciously realize. We are operating off of a playbook that was supplied to us exclusively by other humans and I guess other animals, right? Other things in our environment taught us how to be and how to act, and we're still operating off of, something our parents told us when we were 7, right? Yep. That like periodically that sentence pops into our head, and without even realizing it, we're like, oh, make sure to put your hands behind your back when you're in a store so you don't knock anything off the shelves.
Oh, is that why?
That's a thing that I still hear. Like, I still hear like, oh, hands in pockets. And like, sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. But like, we do not exist as individuals. We cannot do the baby in the cardboard box experiment and like find out what a person is like on their own. And so many paternalism questions are, how much do you want to restrict this individual person's autonomy in order to keep this individual safe? Mm-hmm. And it's the society doing this to an individual. And a lot of paternalism questions kind of dissolve into different kinds of moral questions when you think about society doing a thing for itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's this idea called libertarian paternalism, which I think is sinister as fuck, which is the idea of like, well, you don't use force. You can avoid using force if you just use nudges. If you like change the environment and change the affordances that are available to make people more likely to do good things.
This sounds like something from the bell curve.
Oh my god, that's what my dad must have read that. That's what that he was like. My dad was always like, you should learn reverse psychology so that you can talk people, convince people to do the things you want them to do.
Yeah, one example of this that stuck in my head is you can encourage kids to make healthy eating decisions by putting healthy food at eye level in school cafeterias and putting unhealthy food below it. And that's somehow good because the person is making choices. And it's like, no, just only give them healthy stuff. It's like, there's a question of, do you let them bring junk food to school? Fine. But, like, don't give them stuff that you think is bad. You're not teaching them to make good decisions in that case. If you want to teach them to make good decisions, go through a teaching process.
You're not giving it to them. They're buying it. That's why they do it. It's because they're making money off of the French fries. I mean, so anyway, capitalism is bad.
Yeah. I think How Sharpened the Serpent's Tooth takes the right moral decision at the end, that it is not good to keep people in virtual reality forever. But I don't know that it resolves that fundamental issue of Kukulkan is one dude who is like, I know what's best for the species, and what's best for the species is for every single one of them to be locked up so that none of them can make bad decisions. And really, like, he didn't actually do anything to try and change the species, which is the unit of sapience that he was actually thinking about, right? He was thinking about humanity and decided to do things to some humans in order to change humanity. And instead, if he thought about, how do I help keep humanity safe? Maybe he would have given us penicillin earlier or something like that, right?
You're reminding me of the beginning of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which says that people were always moving around small green pieces of paper to try and be happier, when on the whole it wasn't the small green pieces of paper that were unhappy.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. If you want to help people be happy, look at what makes people happy and safe. Removing dangers, removing the broken glass from the floor is only part of helping people not cut themselves.
A piece of media that really does grapple with this issue in an interesting way is a little anime called Hunter x Hunter. Where I'm not going to spoil the Chimera Ant arc, but you do have a child who is extremely powerful and dangerous, and people have to figure out what to do with that, right? Mm-hmm. That's a question I think that Hunter x Hunter asks, is what do you do with a very dangerous child?
Yeah, and that child says, hey, or one of the many dangerous children you could be talking about says, humans are dangerous but valuable, and so we should keep them in a place where they can be safe.
Right? Uh-huh. Right.
Yep.
That all said, with the main topics covered, it is time for a lightning round of the other interesting things we spotted. Lucy, did you have something?
Yeah. So we were just talking about paternalism, and it makes me think of something that I am thinking about constantly right now, and which y'all are probably tired of hearing me talk about, which is assessment.
Never.
I'm writing a book.
I love it.
On assessment right now, and people who listen consistently could immediately identify that the task set for young 7-year-old Spock was an assessment. And it's a performance task, right? Because he's given a thing to do in order to perform Vulcanness, right? What does he say? It is difficult for a father to find less than perfection in a son. Fun. Mm-hmm. If you fail, there will be those who call you a failure for life. He goes on to add, you will not disappoint me, not if your spirit and mind are Vulcan. So, speaking of high-stakes testing, it turns out you can have high-stakes performance tasks in addition to multiple-choice tests as we do today. So, since I'm working on my own project about assessment, I'm reading a book right now by two of my dear friends. Shout out to Will and Steph, and their co-writer, who's not my friend, but I'm sure she's awesome too.
You know them. They're just not your friend.
Yeah, well, no, I don't know them at all. But I know the book. Failing Sideways, Queer Possibilities for Writing Assessment. And this book is really, they're taking a lot of inspiration from Jack Halberstam's Queer Art of Failure, which I am 100% certain we've discussed previously on this show, which is like talking about queering the idea of failure. But I thought the book that my friends wrote really sets it up really nicely. So I'm just going to share a little bit of what they wrote about it. If everyone were successful in capitalism, who would do the work? If everyone is the CEO, who is working the line? If the worker at Amazon.com distribution site is earning the same pay as Jeff Bezos, why is one working the line and the other taking joyrides into space during a global pandemic? The bosses of capitalism rely on workers who fail every day to become CEOs of their own companies. In the digital gig economy that has emerged in the last 2 decades, for every Facebook, Uber, and Instacart, there must be hundreds of bankrupt startups that go nowhere. If not, success has no real meaning. Under capitalism's elitist yoke, success must remain elusive for the masses, which makes failure the endless and persistent work of most of us. So they're trying to talk about how under capitalism, success is only for an elite few, right? That's one of the big problems about the way we view success. And they're going to continue to talk about this in terms of assessment, and I'll just paraphrase, I guess, or maybe reframe it from my own perspective a bit and say, when we make an assessment, right, that assessment is determining what's being valued and what being successful means. So a lot of times, in order to be successful on an assessment, you might have to accept an identity that's not your identity, right? You might need to sound white. You might need to sound masculine. You might need to sound straight. You might need to sound cis in order to be able to perform the identity that's necessary to be successful on that assessment. So part of queering assessment is about saying, like, other kinds of identities are super valid, and so there's a way in which failing is great if what it means is you're accepting some aspects of your identity, right, that even if those are not supported by whatever institution you're operating in that assessment under. And I thought about it in that whole scene with Spock, because, right, to fail means to not be fully Vulcan, right? And that is so I really feel like in a way this episode encapsulates this idea about queer assessment, because in order for him to succeed, what success means is the acceptance of this identity, right? And it is not actually Spock's identity, right? Like, his identity, he is half human.
Right.
So I thought it was really interesting, and it made me think about my own project and this book that I'm reading, and go buy my friend's book.
It is published? I wasn't sure if it was okay. Yeah, it came.
It'll be in the show notes.
Yeah, 2024. If you're interested in assessment, it's terrific.
One way that I like to think about this is that you don't fail in a vacuum. You fail at a thing. And you can fail at a thing that's a bad thing, right? Like, you can fail to present yourself as someone other than your own identity, right? You can fail to do something that is harmful to you. Or just you can fail to do a thing that's like, why the fuck do they care about this shit?
Yeah.
So it's not always bad to fail. There's a certain kind of people who are going to fail things more often because success is defined as being a certain sort of person often.
100%. And to me, Spock's greatest success in that episode had nothing to do with that assessment. I mean, to me, it was really wild, when Spock, grown-up Spock, stays behind with Achaya while Achaya is suffering and dying, and his younger self is the one who runs back. So Spock really has to radically trust his younger self in that moment to go and do what he needs to do. I actually thought that was pretty profound for me. Like, I was like, oh, would I be able to do that? Would I be able to send my young self off to do something really important? Yeah, I liked that a lot. And it was really didn't have anything to do with the task,
And he could probably predict things like the healer being very resistant to believing Spock. Right, so I didn't put it in the summary, but the healer was like, I've heard you like to play pranks. And Spock like, I played a prank once 2 years ago, you son of a bitch. And the healer's like, would you wake me up for fake things? Like, there was this whole back and forth that you could tell why I didn't put in a fucking summary, but like, that before Spock gets this doctor to come out to look at this damn pet, and adult Spock probably knew that there was, he knows the way his city perceives him as a child, so, and he trusted him to handle it, to be stubborn enough, to be convincing enough to get help.
That's pretty cool, like, actually.
Yeah.
Well, Lissa was lamenting something earlier, and I think it'd be remiss not to talk about Eurocentrism that we see, especially in Serpent's Tooth.
Oof.
So, Hal Sharp in the Serpent's Tooth, there's the character Walking Bear, who's the Comanche guy. He sort of serves as a guide through the episode because he happens to have studied this other culture, right? He happens to have studied the Mayans, which are the specific culture from which we get the name Kukulkan. And the show has trouble imagining that Kirk or McCoy could know about Mesoamerican mythology, which is weird, right? Because Kirk grew up in Iowa. If Walking Bear grew up, maybe Walking Bear grew up in traditional Comanche land, I don't know, but like probably pretty close to each other based on just accent. And so why does Walking Bear know more about Mesoamerica? I mean, because he's Native American, and like that is not only like a convenience of writing, that would be true in our world too, probably.
Right.
Like you'd be more likely to, if you're an indigenous person, know other indigenous cultures. If only to be able to be like, y'all are talking about this thing and it is not my folks. Like that was hundreds of miles away. And when we hear a list of Kukulkan's attempted cities, I think it's in Mayan culture, it's in Egyptian culture. So like the pyramids of Egypt, the Mayan temples, maybe Aztec, and I think there's one more that is like Asian or something like that. And like this is, I would say, Orientalism. We are talking about indigenous Americans, but it's on this general framework of Orientalism and Eurocentrism where European culture, and that includes like white American culture, regards like the other as exotic, and so is like, oh well, there are people who are not us, and they believe weird things. So like that is a framework in which the pyramids of the Mayans and the pyramids of the Egyptians are the same kind of thing and are nothing like any of the pyramid-shaped architecture or mound-shaped architecture that showed up in, say, the UK. And so we've already got this thing of like, well, this dragon, this flying snake, Kukulkan, visited the Egyptians, visited the Mayans. Did he visit England? What, did England try to make a city? Did England, like, did he visit Russia? Did he visit Australia? Conveniently visited, or is mentioned to have visited, specific places that have ruins that we find cool as people steeped in American and European culture that are not, British ruins. This is obviously interacting with the ancient astronauts concept. It built out of a bunch of people. I'm pretty sure we've mentioned it here before. The big dude is von Daniken, who wrote Chariots of the Gods, ? And his kind of argument was basically a whole ancient aliens visited us in antiquity and taught us a bunch of things. And notably, von Daniken is like, there's aliens all over throughout history. Like, the story of Ezekiel has a clear alien in it. Stonehenge is clearly a thing used to signal aliens. And this dude is like, yeah, you can see aliens all throughout history. And the way that gets condensed into popular culture is, well, the Egyptian pyramids were built by aliens. The Mayan temples were built by aliens. And people forget about, or tend to disregard the Stonehenge aspects of it, or, the biblical aspects, in order to say, and Star Trek does this all the fucking time, right?
Yeah.
Star Trek will make any god from Earth history into an alien, except Yahweh, Jehovah, Jesus, Muhammad, usually. Like, any Judeo-Christian individual is not an alien. Maybe not Buddha, maybe not Confucius, I'm not sure, but, like, we don't call specific human beings aliens. But, oh, winged serpent? Yeah, that's clearly an alien, right? Even though, like, there is a real historical person named Kukulkan. Like, we're pretty sure that he's not the original Kukulkan. Like, it seems like there was a human being who got named that at some point in history and got talked about a bit. But, like, you know, this story doesn't even do that, right? The story doesn't do the Stargate thing of saying someone came, heard about Kukulkan, and is like, I'm going to look like that guy. And then you see, like, the Vulcan culture that's produced. For once, Vulcan is not, like, here's this Earth culture, this exotic Earth culture, but alien, right? There's various influences on Vulcan culture, including, I mean, I guess the most prominent one is Judaism. The Vulcan salute and a few other things come from Judaism, sort of indirectly, through, like, childhood experiences of Nimoy and stuff like that. But, like, the Vulcan world is not presented as Oriental. It is not presented as this exotic culture. It's presented as an alien culture, which is different, right? Like, Vulcans are a different kind of person than humans, and they have weird, cool, I think the background art in this episode is really cool, where it's like, all of the architecture looks weird and alien, and it's great. They did great. All the outfits look weird and alien. It's good. And they're not, like, notably, gods visited Vulcan and came away smarter, right? Gods visited Earth and taught us things. God visited Vulcan and, at least according to the Vulcans, learned things from the Vulcans. And, like, why should prehistoric Vulcan be any different from prehistoric Earth in terms of our capabilities to, like, know that if you put a pile of rocks together, it'll stay up better, right? Like, the principles behind the pyramids are big at bottom, small at top, stand up long. Like, we got that. You don't need aliens to help.
And I think, I didn't track it closely because I knew it would make me mad. I think this has some of the very American way of brown people's gods are myths and legends as opposed to gods. Whereas if it's a Christian-based thing, it can be a god, right? Or, you know what I mean? Kind of playing in that space where there's the sanctity of Judeo-Christianity. I think there's some of that happening here, where they repeatedly refer to Kukulkan as a legend and a myth, whereas they would not say that about God, capital G. You say that in America, you get fucking punched. Promise, right? So, yeah.
I think Orientalism is generally a problem that Star Trek has wrestled with, that sometimes does better and sometimes does worse. I think it's relatively harmless in Serpent's Tooth. I don't think that, like, any Earth cultures come across as bad because of it, right? It's kind of harmless, but it's still sort of unexamined. They don't, no one is like, oh yeah, the layout of London also is based on this. They easily could have done.
I didn't feel great about Ensign Walking Bear.
As soon as they said Walking Bear on the bridge, I was like, fuck me, what did I do?
Yeah, I don't, it gave me an ick.
Yeah, I have not checked on Walking Bear's actor, so I don't know. In fact, let me just
I
do
will.
that
Nope,
right.
hold on. I got you.
Okay.
I got you later.
Okay. Oh no. Look at my show document.
Well.
Great. Well, I guess all I'll say is... So that's next.
I do it immediately.
But Star Trek often is the Planeteers, right? Often, especially original Trek was like, there's a Russian, there's a Japanese American, there's an American, there's a black lady, there's one alien. It's very in keeping for there to be one indigenous person.
You're not casting aspersions on Captain Planet, are you?
Captain Planet is also a story where there's one person, one distinctly ethnic person from different areas.
Captain Planet, he's our hero. Gonna bring pollution down to zero.
Yes. But also has a kind of a simplistic, if I can engage in some Orientalism, Chinese menu approach to
Oh,
ethnicity. But like Walking Bear comes from a specific culture. Walking Bear is Comanche. Walking Bear has a name that at least kind of sounds Comanche. He's no Chakotay, right? Chakotay comes from a fucking made up native culture based on the advice of someone who lied about being indigenous.
He's portrayed by an asshole.
Yes, portrayed by a legitimately indigenous asshole.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Walking Bear is a problem, but not as big of a problem. But I guess we might need to talk about that in a little bit more. In addition to the deep stuff, we are all big Star Trek fans, so let's head to 10 forward to start talk about stuff we geeked about. Melissa, who is the voice actor for the Comanche Walking Bear?
James Doohan, the voice actor for Montgomery Scott. Scotty plays Walking Bear Eric's, who is the sort of beige E.T. looking motherfucker on the bridge.
With 3 arms, right?
I didn't catch how many arms. I was so distracted by his weird head. And Kokolgon.
Oh, wow.
In that episode.
Put in some work.
Doohan is like a phenomenal voice actor in a lot of ways. If you look at the list of things he voice acted in animated series, the list is as long as your arm. He basically filled in for anything, everything that they needed voice-wise. Many of the aliens on the bridge. So he's just like talking to himself in those episodes, right? And again, great work. They gave no fucks about trying to find somebody to fill those spots who might have represented anything about those characters. As soon as he started talking as Walking Bear, I was like, oh, it's Jimmy. Like, I recognize his voice.
Is Doohan Scottish also?
Oh, no. I don't think so.
Yeah, so he's putting on an accent as Scotty as well.
Yeah. It's like a renowned thing about animated series is how many roles he picks up. But yeah, they gave no shits. I mean, they put their budget elsewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, their budget was in getting interesting writers and directors and doing art and animation, you know. But yikes. Yikes.
If you haven't seen the animation for Star Trek the Animated Series, it is worth looking up. There will be some in the show notes. I may include the shot of Spock like demurely putting a hand over his mouth as he becomes concerned about the people who disappeared. It's very how do you put it?
I think it's a bit minimalist, right? They rely a lot on blinking and eyebrow raises to communicate emotion, where the rest of the face stays exactly the same.
Mm-hmm. They do a lot of zoom-ins on people's faces, close-ups, going from a whole wide shot, zooming in onto half or 1/4 of someone's face to, again, maybe show an eyebrow or lifting or something like that.
Faces are very gestural with bold lines.
In that first scene when everybody had forgotten who Spock was, and they have an Andorran first officer, and it showed the Andorran, and he does this blinky thing, and I was like, oh, he's up to something. Like, I realized really quickly, like, I couldn't read anybody's expressions on this show.
No.
There's a lot of things that the show does to stretch one frame of animation into a second or two.
Yeah. Oh, fucking James Doohan. That's it. That's all. I have nothing else to say. It's just fucking James Doohan. You could just say that for everything about animated series, is this motherfucker's gonna pop up at least twice in every episode.
Well, I'm just gonna share my unironic love for one part of the animation, which was all the space monsters that we got to see in just 2 episodes. I assume on live Star Trek they don't do as many space monsters, because then we're gonna get things. Oh, what's the name of the monster from original series who comes back a whole lot on Strange New Worlds? The lumbering thing.
The Gorn?
The Gorn?
Yeah. Yeah, you're gonna get a whole lot of ping pong ball eyes, whatever, if they do that. But on the animated series...
Or even like a dog with a unicorn horn, which is a legit alien that shows up in the original series.
Yeah, but these were legitimate space monsters. So we had the Sealot, which was Spock's pet and a very good boy.
It's the walrus bear.
Yeah, and then we had the Lematia, which was the sort of green poison cat that kills Achaya. And then I included the Mayan god on my list of space monsters, although I think he's sentient. His design is very space monster, and he is beautiful. Like, it's definitely appropriation in a bad way, but it's beautiful. And then we met.
Well, they do acknowledge the source of it, I guess. So, that's good, at least.
Yeah.
And then he has a whole bunch of specimens, like we've already talked about. I think the only one they name is the Capellan Power Cat. However, Capellan Power Cat is going to be the name of my next book. So,
is this the assessment book that's going to be that?
No, I guess, but that book's already got a working title, so it'll have to be the one after that. But whatever I write next is going to be called Capellan Power Cat. That's for sure. I loved that cat. I thought it was one of the best things I've ever seen.
I like how both episodes managed, I think, to get an animal licking its paw, right? So you get that sort of lick sound, which is one of my least favorite sounds in animated shows, but I thought it was adorable.
When they tranquilize the Capellan Power Cat, like, they take moments to have Enterprise crew be like, "Oh, it's a big cat. Oh." That's great.
And you got to say that sentence that is where you just say Capellan Power Cat. Like there's no way, there's nothing that could happen in that sentence that's not awesome.
I think this is the power of animated series. This is what they get to do that they can't afford to do on Star Trek unless it's going to involve bad animatronics, bad CG, bad, you know what I mean? Like taping a horn to a dog, like whatever the fuck. This is what animated series gets to do. Interesting sentient aliens on the fucking bridge, and critters they can just make and toss, right? They don't have to keep them around and reuse them.
It very much reminds me of animation that I loved from my childhood. Things like Thundarr the Barbarian and the Herculoids, like, that had all these really cool creatures and everything. And it, like, the animation is of an era, right? But it's not afraid to be like batshit.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think more children's TV today should be batshit.
I think there's some people doing some very good work making some really batshit children's stuff right now.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just too steeped in Sonic.
You might be.
I mean, we exist in a post-Adventure Time world.
I loved Adventure Time.
I would say that The Last Airbender has probably a rate of one weird monster per episode.
That one seems less batshit to me. I give it to you on Adventure Time. Adventure Time is batshit. But I don't know about The Last Airbender. That feels more...
It gets really batshit with its spirits, I think. The Face Stealer is an all-time great creature. Well, my 10 forward item is something that's much less batshit and is very grounded. It's a phenomenon that I think has shown up 3 times on Before the Future Came. We saw it in the premiere of Discovery. We saw it in Star Trek 2009, and we see it here, which is a trio of Vulcan bullies yelling at a person that they're human.
Yep.
We talk about monoculture and how Star Trek has a problem with monoculture. I personally get really fucking annoyed at the weird Vulcan ethnic supremacy that shows up, where, Spock being like, aliens showed up and they went away wiser. It's like, is that the whole story? Really? You just kind of taught them shit and they left? And I like that at least from the animated series on, we had the concept of, yes, Vulcan is this place of logic, but it has shitty kids too.
Yeah.
And it hasn't figured out how to solve its shitty kid problem. Like, I think that we, as a human society, can eliminate bullying. I think that bullying is a result of a bunch of social patterns and environmental conditions that we could just eliminate.
Yeah, we could just put them in virtual reality and spoot them off into space. Or, option B, we could do a nuclear bomb.
Or, make sure that everyone's fed and make sure that people are taught about consent and emotional regulation and all of that.
Come on.
Vulcan has an applied science of emotional regulation. Vulcan's entire culture is... I say Vulcan, sorry. I guess it is called Vulcan now, right? At this point, it's Vulcan, the planet.
Oh, you're thinking of the whole Discovery...
Later, it gets renamed. But yeah. Anyway. Vulcan hasn't solved its bully problem. Vulcan has shitty kids, and all of Vulcan logic and emotional control fails when it comes to getting kids to not call each other names. And also, the haha resolution of Spock's bullying is that he's going to go and physically assault them.
Yeah.
He's going to go and demonstrate that he learned the Vulcan neck pinch by neck pinching one of them, presumably.
Yep.
And they call him barbarian. They say he'll never be a Vulcan. Like, they do a literal hate crime. Like, they literally yell at and ostracize this kid for his ethnicity. And that's just not a thing that's solved on Vulcan. And I think that's cool. We see cases of, like, the Vulcan superiority being fake everywhere, right? All the time. Yeah. Spock exists in order to say, well, it's better to not have emotion. And then Kirk is emotional and wins and is like, see, Spock, sometimes you have to have emotions. But this is a case of Vulcan failing itself, right? It's not that not everyone should be like a Vulcan. It works for Vulcans, but not for everyone. This is like, hey, your society's fucking broken. You believe in emotional control and rising above your baser instincts, but you can't protect your own children from your own children.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting, like, little friction at the center of Vulcans for Star Trek.
I think Vulcan ostensibly has the perspective that you have to teach children to become good people.
Mm-hmm. It's a wild way to construe children.
Oh, it's a very common way to construe people.
Oh, yeah. Like, yeah. We do it all the time.
Yeah, we talk about children not having empathy until they reach a certain age or some shit, right?
Boys will be boys.
Yeah. I think that's the approach they take, but there's still, like, everyone expects Spock to have the emotional regularity of an adult, but the other children are exempted from this and permitted to commit, like you said, basically hate crimes, right? Mm-hmm. In every rendition of this, it's that bad.
I do think that part, like, resonates because, you know, those kids who are full Vulcans, right, they are less likely to be under scrutiny than Spock, who is half human. And, I mean, you certainly see that in our culture. I mean,
yep.
Right? You know, all the stuff that white kids can do, and then, you know, black kids getting kicked out of preschool for something stupid.
Right.
Yeah, biting someone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, this ties back into the paternalism and individuality, right? We say, well, children do not have the emotional regulation or empathy in order to XYZ, and so we will allow them to be monsters to each other.
Yep.
Right? Instead, we could say, given that children have trouble with emotional regulation and consent and all of this, how do we construct a society in which they still won't bully each other?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very different way of looking at it that makes it seem far more tractable.
Right.
Because kids are also fundamentally nice and care about each other.
They really are.
Kids are really good at getting along. And so, like, they're not fundamentally monstrous, and we, by our choices on how we treat kids and construct their environment, can affect that balance between the kid that always wants to make friends with any creature they meet and the kid who wants to call people names.
Yeah.
Okay. At the end of each episode, we pick the next thing we're watching based on the connection from this episode.
You wanna...
Oh no!
Your tone.
You wanna try that again with? No.
I say we keep it.
Because it kind of sounded like you don't like the idea of picking our next episode.
I'm not super fond of the idea of me picking it, but here we are.
Oh, this is amazing. I'm so ready.
So this episode, particularly Yesteryear, had some timey-wimey bullshit. And both of these episodes had some animation. So next time we're watching
cross fingers.
We're watching A Moral Star Part 1 and Part 2, which are from Prodigy.
Excellent.
And
Excellent.
I don't know what episode numbers they are. I forgot to look that up.
It's not the Prodigy time episode I was hoping for.
Oh, well, do you want to change
which
it?
is the time loop episode. No. I think this works much better.
Okay. This is season 1, episode 9, is A Moral Star, part 1. And
we're doing part 1 and 2?
I think we should. I think it's
Yeah.
a complete story. But I have no problem switching it to the time loop one. I love a time loop.
Oh, no. One of my favorite episodes of Star Trek, period, is Time Amok. So, but this is literally the next episode.
I am excited to talk about Gwen. So, Prodigy is basically the new animated Star Trek, ostensibly an audience of young viewers, children. I think season 1 is on Netflix now.
Netflix, yeah. They took it off of Paramount.
Yeah, there's a whole lot happening with Prodigy. I know season 2 had a little bit of a snag in getting released.
Yeah. It was almost done and they canceled it, and then Netflix picked it up.
Yeah.
Or I'm sure you can track down someone who's willing to watch it with you who has Netflix or something like that.
Yeah.
So next time we'll be discussing the 2-part A Moral Star from Prodigy on Before the Future Came. You can find links and show notes at beforethefuture.space, including some pictures of animated monsters. We'd really appreciate it if you could rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. You can rate us other places, but really Apple Podcasts is the place where the most discovery happens. Although, if you really want people to know about the show, tell them about it. Post on Blue Sky or whatever and say that you like the show. We'd love to have more word of mouth listeners. You can send us comments on our website. You can contact us on Instagram and TikTok if you search for our podcast. And you can talk to us on Mastodon at beforethefuturecame@trekkies.social. And if you've got a question that you want to send via email, you can send that to onscreen@beforethefuture.space.
I'm Lucy Arnold and sometimes blog at intertextualities.com. I'm also now on Blue Sky at zenlucymarie.bluesky.social.
I'm Gregory Avery Weir, and you can find me at ludusnovus.net or on Blue Sky at gregoryaveryweir.bsky.social.
I'm Melissa Avery Weir, and I live at urson.net and on Mastodon at melissa@urson.life.
Our music is Let's Pretend by Josh Woodward, used under a Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 license. Thank you for listening.
I'm sure we'll all live happily ever after, surrounded by butterflies, children, and laughter. It's a fairy tale story, so let's just pretend. Hallelujah, amen, it's the end. Happily